Hi, this is Cheryl back with you from Farmhouse, Frugally, and I am so excited about today's spring DIYs. Today I have 5 under 5 and they are all spring related. I'm going to start with this little cardboard candy box that I had made over a couple of years ago when my granddaughter was an infant, and that was in her nursery, and now I'm going to paint over this. And I still have that stamp, so I could always redo this at some point if I ever wanted to on something else. But I thought that this would be a good base for using these little cloche molds that I got from Temu, much less expensive than the IOD and very, very similar. So I am starting by brushing on some cornstarch, and then I am using some of the modeling clay, and I am going to just press that into the cloche that I'm using today. It works really well and it doesn't crack. It's just a little bit hard to shape and mold initially into the area. But once you get it in, you can just use gravity to get it back out again. It did pop right out, and then glue it onto the surface. And it is almost a little bit flexible when it dries, so it's not going to break like some of the air dry clay pieces can. And then I'm just attaching that with the quick and thick glue and pressing that on. And then once I have that on, I'm going to go ahead, give it a few minutes, and then I'm going to paint the entire surface. I also had molded up a couple of fern pieces from another mold while I had the clay out, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue those right at the bottom just to give that a little bit more of something else at the base of the cloche. And then once that's fully dry and those are painted as well, I'm going to go into my stash and I'm going to see what I have for a napkin so that I can use it to decoupage inside the cloche. And the napkin that I chose because it did have birds on it, and so I wanted to just cut that to size and decoupage that right onto the center portion of the cloche to make it look like there is a bird in a gilded bird cage. And then I ended up decoupaging the entire top of the box so that the sheen would be the same on the whole thing. I did have in my stash the perfect teal-like color that is in the napkin on the cloche. So I am going to just kind of add a little bit of that on the tops of these 2 fern leaves in order to spread some of that teal around, onto this lid. I'm going to pull out some rub and buff, and I am going to pull out the details in both the top and center of the cloche and also the ferns themselves so that detail will really pop. And I added a bow in the same color tone around the box and tied the bow on top, and that is how that came out. And that takes me on to item number 2. I've had this in my stash for a while. It came from the dollar store back when it was $1, and it was just a Happy Easter sign. And so I took the twine out of the top of that and went ahead and painted the sign with 2 coats of linen white chalk paint and give me a good base to create a spring sign. I am following the same process that I did on the lid of the box, but this time I am using a few other molds that I had in my stash. I had picked up a number of molds from Amazon and Temu and a couple of different places. I had made a number of these when I had the clay out because it is a little bit difficult to work with. I decided while I had it molded, I was just going to go ahead and fill a whole bunch of the molds that I had going on and would eventually use the the shapes. I am going into my napkin stash and I'm going to create a multimedia piece here by adding not just the clay but also a little bit of paint and a little bit of decoupage. So this napkin or tissue paper had a lot of different branches on it, and I decided to go ahead and create my own tree or trees out of the the pieces and parts that I took off. So I started with a gold paint pen and I sort of created just a branch, and then I would lay down some of the napkin and just kind of make it initially the shape that I wanted it to be, and then I went ahead and took each piece and just decoupaged that directly on with just some Mod Podge on my paintbrush. And then once I get that branch on there, then it already has the birds in place. Then I'm going to just keep adding that until I'm happy with the way that that is filled in. I'm going to go ahead and use some of the same teal blue color on the little tag sign at the top and color that in, and then I'm going to get a little bit of white later on and make that a little bit less teal. And then I'm taking that same color and I'm going to do the same thing to the ferns and the little greenery that I did in the other, so that these two items, look similar and look good in the same vignette. And then once I have that done, I started with the distressing ink, and I went over the top of the leaves, and I went over the birds and a little bit in the corners. And then I decided that it just isn't quite enough of the antiquing look that I am going for, so I end up pulling out the actual antiquing wax and really bringing out the detail from these birds specifically, and then giving it a little bit more around the edges to make this a bit more vintage. I like the antique gold color rub and buff for this, and I'm highlighting the edge of that little frame tag on the top, the little sign, and then kind of pulling out some of the corners, tips of the birds, and a little bit on the leaves as well. It's hard to see here the difference between the dark wax and the antiquing, the gold rub and buff, but it actually does look different when you see it in certain light. And then I took that same gold paint pen, and I'm just going to write lovebirds on this little sign. And that way this could be a Valentine or spring or year-round piece. This is just a good time of year to kind of mix up some of the different seasons so that you don't have something just for a day or a week. I did decide to brush over some of the bird feathers with a little bit of white, again adding a little bit more definition and toning that down just a little bit. And then I decided that I wanted to add some of the other napkin pieces onto the bottom of this tree to make it look like I had more than one foliage there. And then I took that same pretty teal colored ribbon and put that through the two holes that were already in the sign to have something to hang it from. And then I clipped on a little bird that I got on the good table at the dump, and I added one up here as well. And that is how this little spring vignette came out. I would love to know what you think about these two. It is so much fun to play with the clay and the decoupage and the paint and the different multimedia here. It's a little out of my comfort zone color-wise, but I would love to know what you think about these creations. This collaboration, 5 Under 5, is hosted by Emily at Farm Charm Chic, and her channel, as well as the playlist for all the other creators, will be in my description box, so make sure you check that out. And this next item I got at the good table at my dump, it looks like a cork base filled with moss with a cloche, and the cloche has a hole. So if you know what the hole is for in the side of the glass, I would love to know. So I am starting by taking the dark antiquing wax and going over the cork to darken that up and make it a little bit less orangey and a little more brown, and then putting a stick in it with some dark antiquing wax on that as well. And then I am going to change out the color of the moss. I don't want the bright green, or the dark green one rather. I just want it to be a little more natural looking. So once I have that done, I have this little bird house, and I'm going to antique wax the roof, and then I'm going to paint the little bird house just in some neutral color here and make that look very vintage. And then once I have the birdhouse done, I am going to go into my stash and see what I have for a bird, some little birds, nest or eggs or anything that will go along with this little spring feel. But I want to keep it very neutral and very vintage feeling. The bird that I did find had a little hole in the top. It was a salt and pepper shaker or something, so I filled that with some of the clay, and then I gave that a couple of coats with the same latex paint that I had mixed for another project. And then I had a couple of eggs, so I did the same thing. And then once the eggs are dry, I am going to speckle both kind of a little bit on the bird and onto the eggs with just a little bit of the dark Java brown paint. And then that is pretty much all I'm going to do to this. I am going to add it all back together again underneath this cloche. And then I decide that I want to add another, just a little bit of some boxwood greenery that I had onto that stem of, not stem, but the base of the birdhouse. And then I also want to stick another stem through that hole that is in that glass cloche side, just to give that a little bit of dimension and to highlight the uniqueness of that in the side there. So I think it's very sweet, and I think this is going to be a keeper for me for the office that I am working on. I work from home, so I have been putting together this at the same time as the bathroom, so I will be definitely getting you some videos on those coming up in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you hit subscribe if you have not already. So that was a free project. Everything was in my stash, and I got that item free at the dump. Now that takes me on to this item, which also I got free at the dump, and it is one of those mail holders, and it had some hooks at the bottom. It had 3 and they were uneven, so I'm just going to pull them off. I don't need them. And then I have this green color that I got mixed up. I thought I was going to use it in my bathroom, and I didn't. I just had this sample, and so I am going to use this you probably quite a bit, I suppose, this spring and summer. And I do really like the color. I just did not like it in the bathroom with the other items that I had chosen. So this is a oak wood, and it's a little bit orangey, and I am going to cover over. It's not that I don't like the oak, of course I do, but I want to, I want to do something different with this, and I want to update it. So I thought, and to make it look more spring, I thought it would be nice to have this pale, it's almost a minty green, or a pale sage green. So I'm going to give that just one good coat of this latex paint. It covers it very well. And then once that's fully dry, I'm going to take my little finger sander, and I am going to distress it because I like that look, all around the edges primarily. And then once I have that done, I just went into my stash and I pulled out the transfers that I had left over from the IOD Lover of Flowers, and I am also going to ink up a little ink pad here, and I'm going to stamp just one bird from, I think this is the IOD Birds in Flight. No, I don't remember the name of this particular stamp, but I'm just going to go ahead with this little brownish antique colored ink and just ink one bird in the center of that. And then I'm going to transfer one each of the flowers that I had left over from a project that I used these transfers on last year. And I'm going to put one on the first and one on the third little cubbies, as well as the names of the flowers that came with them. Look at the adorable silver tea strainer, these two parts that I have on the bottom that I got free at the dump this week. It is absolutely adorable. I love it. And so this is right now just staged in my entryway. And I just love the way this came out. This has that definite spring but vintage feel that I love so much. I'm not sure what I will do with it, but here it is, just decorated for today. So I'd love to know what you think about that. And then that takes me on to these little terracotta pots that I also got for free. And I am going to take some spackling, and I am going to, with a glove on, I am just going to go ahead and cover that completely with the spackling. And it doesn't have to be neat. In fact, it's not probably a good idea to have it terribly neat, because I do want it to look kind of old world, and just kind of get it on there and move it around, because I am going to be able to sand back some of the real rough pieces once this is fully dry. So I did both of the pots and both of the little plates that come underneath the pots, and I get those completely covered and then set out to dry. And then I take the sandpaper once that's dry and smooth off, anything real rough. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint that with the same color. And then I just painted that with that natural color. And of course, I had to put a bird and a bird's nest in one and some greenery in the other. And I think that they came out very nice. I like that look of the old world spackling over that terracotta. Very easy to achieve. So let me know which is your favorite. And don't forget to check out the playlist. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for stopping by.